Hi, I'm Paul Baxendale, and welcome to blog post 16, dealing with tragedy and life sufferings, whether self-inflicted or not. Hi everyone, to my latest blog post. Today I wanted to talk with you about the impact my accident had on my life, but also wanted to show you how the process I went through in healing from it, both physically and perhaps most importantly, emotionally and psychologically, can maybe be translated to other painful, difficult and disastrous moments in anybody's life. And most importantly, it doesn't matter if they are moments that have been self-inflicted or whether they have just been thrown at you by the universe, over whose control you had absolutely no say whatsoever. So yes, it's going to be a serious blog this week, but not without its lighter moments. As I'm sure you've already found out, or if you've never yet been hit by tragedy, that even the most horrendous of situations, there can always be something that can make you smile or even laugh. Sometimes simply out of hysteria that anything so terrible could even happen. But often, because as humans, we do find humour in situations where there shouldn't be any, out of a almost reflex reaction, a nervous reflex, which can signify how grateful we are that this situation is happening to somebody else rather than ourselves. And it's a habit and a reaction that has existed ever since we evolved from earliest times. If you've seen the present, you've seen all things, from time immemorial into all eternity. For everything that happens is related and the same. There are those who naturally have a positive and sunny disposition, and others take life more seriously and have a propensity for the negative. Neither is right or wrong or better or worse. They're just different. However, when tragedy occurs in life, and the scale of tragedy is always different for each individual, whether you are of a positive or of a more serious disposition matters not. It hits hard. When life throws you an act of fate, like my accident, or perhaps a loved one dying, or you lose someone you felt you couldn't live without, or you lose a business or your purpose, then that leaves you with nothing but your thoughts and a million questions. Then I think we have learned enough about pain to know that there are stages of recovery that need to be lived through. Grief, anger, guilt, hopelessness, a question of faith, questions of who it is you actually are, and then hopefully, finally, you get to a place where the rebuilding can occur. But I'm getting ahead of myself here. Let's take a step back, and as I recall my own journey, feel free to think about something in your own life where you may have had similar feelings or hurts or even just anxieties about what your mind thinks may happen in the future. For we fear too much the things that rarely come to pass. But when reality actually strikes us in a terrible way, we're often without any idea with how to deal with it. You'll read many motivational characters, whether actual speakers or social media inspirators, that can repeat quote after motivational quote and advice on living a more fulfilled, meaningful and happier life. But what do those characters have to say when life throws a meteorite at your head and heart? Have they the life experience of having gone through the emotional turmoil that comes along with the tragedy? Possibly, but probably not. And in fact, they often do people a disservice by offering a type of make-believe source of knowledge that in those times of real life-changing disaster leaves you bereft of any personally built-up reserves of strength and power and the tools with which you will need to help yourself through such times. Ultimately, it all comes down to you. Well, you and your God, if you have one. For others, myself included, who has always kind of believed in God but has never had a personal knowledge or experience where I could ever say, I know that God exists, or has a religion that has helped form my personality and support network. But even with God, these moments can try the very most religious of people. Tragedies can cause people to question their faiths, sometimes even abandon them. So I'm going to try and explain how I crawled and scraped my way forwards and out of the despair I felt to finally find a new purpose and once again feel like I had not just reasons, but a purpose for living. And that wasn't anywhere nearly as easy as it just sounded right then. I hope and I pray that you never personally suffer tragedy in your life. But if you do, and if you have done, you'll know it's no easy thing to overcome, if indeed you ever truly do overcome it. But at least I have moved on from it. And that is my hope for this talk, that I may give you some tools to help you in the event of you experiencing such a time. It may even help those who find themselves anxious at life generally, and give you tools so you at least then know that should your worst fears come true, then you will be able to handle it. And that anxiety you're feeling right now isn't really needed. It's just a warning sign to be on the alert for behaviour that can derail you and nothing more. And what is worry, after all, except the thought of things that have not yet happened? And as Seneca reminds us, that thing may never happen anyway. What I advise you to do, not to be unhappy before the crisis comes. Some things torment us more than they ought. Some torment us before they ought, and some torment us when they ought not to torment us at all. We are in the habit of exaggerating or imagining or anticipating sorrow. Seneca. I get asked quite often how I still keep doing the things I do. Why try and do them if they increase your pain? I'm asked, and that's a very good question. And I'm not sure I have the full answer, but I think it goes something like this. I would rather keep doing them knowing I'm still doing something than to stop and let myself wither away and become useless and a slave to the pain. You see, I equate the pain of doing whatever the task is to being less than the pain of not doing anything at all. And I know that it's not a be-all or nothing game, that there is a middle path. And I suppose that's what I'm trying to find now. I'm trying to find the path where I feel purposeful and that I'm doing what I should be doing with my life, and trying to minimize the pain that accompanies the actions, knowing that any actions will inflict some pain just due to my condition. So how did I get here? Over a decade after the accident that changed the course of my life completely. Why did it take so long? Some may ask. And others may ask, how did I ever get through those years at all? My journey through in disability was a long and difficult one that is not yet finished and may never be finished, in the sense that I no longer ever feel frustrated or discouraged at times with my physical inability to do the things I used to do. But I am in a much better place than I was 5 years ago, and definitely in a better place than I was 10 years ago. But when the accident first happened, I did not feel as though my life would change forever, because I did not fully understand the full implications of the damage that I'd incurred. And maybe that was a blessing. No matter how false the sense of returning to full mobility I had at the time, if I had known the full extent of the damage right away, it may have been much harder to bear. And who knows, it may have even been too much to bear. So, to set the scene then, for the prior 15 years, my working life had either been owning gyms, being a bodybuilder, being a personal trainer, and for the previous 25 years, I had been a bodybuilder, and even before that, I was an active sportsman. Even as a young boy, I played football, rugby, tennis, badminton, swimming, shot put, javelin, running, and cricket, something athletic every single day of my life. So a large part of my identity that had been moulded over my youth and my young adult development was as an athlete, and more specifically as a bodybuilder. As you grow up, you learn by experience, wins and losses, who you are at heart. And then you tend to attach labels to yourself, so that when asked by others what you do and who you are, you have a fairly quick and correct answer to give them. It's much more complicated than that, but for those without a degree in psychology, it's the easiest way to put it. You develop your own sense of right and wrong, your own ethics and values that you hold yourself to. And should you ever cross those values, then you get a warning sign in your gut that something is not right. Whether you think of it as the devil on one shoulder and the angel on the other, it is in reality your mind telling you that that action, although it may give you pleasure and instant gratification, is against your ethical values and against what you truly know to be right. It's always a danger to act against such warnings. Believe me, I've met too many people, including myself, who have ignored such warning signs and have tried to rationalize the action to themselves in some bullshit way. Oh, everybody does this. It's what everyone does these days. Or once when someone tried to explain away their promiscuous and self-destructing behavior to me, not knowing that she had lost the respect of every single person around her, but also more importantly had destroyed her chances of ever attracting a truly high value mate, or even of ever having any meaningful relationship ever again, as her psyche and her soul was so damaged by her lack of self-worth. Why is it wrong if it's involving two consenting adults? Or, I'm prepared to take the risk, it's unlikely to happen though. Believe me, the consequences are all too real. No, not everybody is doing this. And no, just because two people agree to do it, it does not make it right, nor does it make it good for you. And yes, that negative consequence will more than likely occur. So my advice is, when you hear these warnings inside of you, take heed of them. In fact, I was speaking to a clinical psychologist very recently who had been in practice for over 30 years. And he said to me something that I can't forget. He said that never in all of his days of practice had he ever come across a client whose lies or deceptions had never come back to bite them hard. I was fascinated by this. He told me that he believed it always came around, that a lie told, an untruth given, an act of deception, or an act where the individual knew inside themselves that it was the wrong thing to do, had always, without an exception, come back to haunt them, most often in massive ways much larger than the initial act had been at the time. This made me sit up and think very quickly and strongly about the values and ethics I had lived my life by, especially since embracing Stoic philosophy. They were not only improving my life, which I knew they were, as helping me deal with my disability, but perhaps it was also stopping me making those mistakes that would have eventually come back and bitten me, or perhaps even destroyed me. So I'd grown into an adult with my sense of being an athlete, a bodybuilder, very much a large part of my identity. I did, in fact, live, sleep and breathe bodybuilding. From about the age of 18, I actually started the gym when I was 14. I was completely obsessed in becoming the very best bodybuilder I could be. I ate cleanly, I slept my 8 hours a night, I didn't ever drink, I didn't ever party. I trained like the pros I had seen train, pros like Jeff King, pros like Mike Quinn, Tom Platz and Johnny Fuller. High intensity training that had me running to the puke bucket many a time. Muscle soreness was a regular thing, and that feeling of pushing the body past anything I had ever done before was exhilarating, exciting, and almost addictive. I loved it. I was training 6 days a week, way too much for a natural trainer like myself. And even though I was training with Johnny Fuller, he never ever promoted the use of anabolics to me. I think he wanted me to max out my genetic, natural potential before making the decision that could never be taken lightly back then. So thank you, Johnny. Rest in peace, my friend, my brother. I gradually got on stage and I began competing in local and regional shows, still completely natural. I always competed in non-tested shows. I knew the other guys were on the gear, but I had no fear of competing against them. Youthful ignorance or arrogance or whatever, but I never placed out of the top 2 in any of those shows. In fact, I won 3 out of 5 of them. I then progressed onto the national stage and the British finals. By this point, I had taken the decision to take anabolics and move over to the dark side of bodybuilding. I competed on the national level for about 3 years, and then I made the European Championships, and then I made the World Championships. At this point, I was running my own gym, working 14-hour days, looking after my little spit and sawdust gym in Swindon, Mr. B's gym. I then began travelling up to Birmingham in the hope of meeting and seeing Dorian Yates train, which I did for about 6 months until he actually asked me if I wanted to join him and Kenny Brown for a leg session. That was the start of my training relationship with Dorian, and it lasted about 18 months before Leroy came back to Temple and became Dorian's full-time training partner. In 1999, I retired from the stage and I emigrated with my wife and my daughter to Australia, where I continued to train and to train other athletes. I made good friends, very good friends with Terry Mitsos, the great Australian IFBB pro over there, and I trained every day at his gym in Sydenham, Sydney for a couple of years. Then, after returning to the UK, I opened another gym and again began coaching other people. This was in 2003, and I continued this until around 2006, when I sold the gym to focus on my personal training full time. It was much less hours, much more sociable hours, and better money, as I could make more money in an hour coaching than I could in a day in the gym. Such was my life until the 17th of August 2007. I was preparing for my first client of the day, a lady called Sarah Dans, lovely lady. I'm sure she still blames herself for my accident, which is crazy, but I think it was just a reaction of guilt association with my bad fortune. I was walking down the stairs in our rented house when one of the stair treads slipped off its edge and the complete stair came falling away, and me with it. Landed on the floor some meters down, and so did I. At first I was in shock. My wife phoned the ambulance service to be told it would be 45 minutes to an hour before one was sent. So somehow I managed to get myself across the floor and into the car, and my wife drove me to the hospital accident and emergency, where they were fantastic, immediately getting me on a trolley, administering morphine to allow me to relax sufficiently to be taken into an MRI machine to see what damage had been done. Now, I've already told the story of the length of time it took for the doctors and consultants to find all of the physical damage. At first, they thought it was simply a ruptured quadricep. Then, my pancreas had shut down under the huge cortisol release. Then, my hips had been found to be irreparably damaged. And finally, my spine had been damaged, with every single disc in my spine affected, meaning that again, surgery was completely out of the question. Unless I wanted to risk having a titanium cage built around my spine, and for them to disc by disc create space between and try not to cut the spinal cord in the process. No, thank you. I decided I would deal with what life had dealt me, but also not to be ignorant to the advances in medicine and surgery and stem cell treatment which may someday offer a solution. My mindset as it stands is, I'm living as though no treatment will ever become available, though it's much easier to adopt a mindset to cope with that one single scenario. Where did I start searching for answers in what to do? Okay, I had my rehab to do, but I knew that rehab was only ever going to get me so far. And basically, I was disabled for life, now with minimal mobility and much of my life in a wheelchair. If any of you watching this video are in this position now and have either always been or have recently become disabled, then all I hope to offer is hopefully one or two pieces of thoughts, things I learned along the way that helped me go from despair and suicidal depression to where I am today, which is not without days of frustration for sure, but I am filled with purpose. I do awake excited each morning and eager for the day ahead, despite the difficulties of getting out of bed, bathing, shaving, showering, and then just day-to-day living. If I can, I'm going to go back to day one of my recovery and take you through the years. Yes, it took years, and it is a continual process that likely will never end completely. Originally, I was still very much in athlete mode, so I was fully determined to recover. No matter what it took, I was willing to do it, and I knew what to do. Away I went. However, what if your whatever it took still couldn't get you to where you wanted to go? That was my initial problem. With my old athlete mindset, I absolutely believed that if I put in enough hard work over time, then I could rectify my condition. As it turned out, it wasn't a completely useless mindset, as there was actually a lot I could do to help my condition, or at least nullify the downsides physically of sitting in a chair all day, such as muscle wastage and increased body fat. I was able to maintain some of my muscle mass, and that helped me get around when I needed to use my upper body strength to either pull myself up from things like toilets, chairs, and even get out of bed with the use of a bed rail to pull myself up with. So I continued to train the rest of my body as well as I could, and I have continued to do so ever since. However, what is important to note is that not only has my mindset changed with regards to training, but that the way I train has changed completely too. Firstly, the mindset. Now, when you're a sports person, and especially a bodybuilder, your entire life revolves around your sport. From the timing of your meals to how much sleep you get and how much nutrients you get from the foods you eat. Once I discovered that my hips were seriously damaged, the decision to lose body weight, and by that I mean muscle, was a simple one to make. Of course, I wanted to stay strong enough to have maximum mobility where I could use, and for my upper body to compensate for my lower body when it could. But I also knew I had to lose a lot of weight, and a lot of that weight would have to be muscle. And muscle that I'd had for the majority of my life. Now, interestingly, this wasn't as difficult a change as some may imagine. I've certainly known many bodybuilders who suffer from body dysmorphia, where they see themselves as skinny, yet are extremely muscular. But for me, the pain, the physical pain of carrying around over 280 pounds of muscle and bone was leaving me literally screaming in agony. So losing muscle weight was only going to reduce some of that pain. And when you're in extreme pain, believe me, you'll do anything. You do whatever it takes to reduce it. So I immediately went on a diet and gradually, over several years, took over 7 stone off my frame to where I am today. Still not small, but a healthy around 95 kilograms and maintaining a low body fat of around 8 to 10% year round. This keeps me still looking in half decent shape, although I honestly couldn't care less about how I look these days. But also the stress on my hips and my spine is much reduced. But I can still use my fairly powerful upper body to travel myself in my wheelchair. I never allow anyone else to push me. It's one of my golden rules. Maybe a little harsh on myself, but I do think it's making rules like that keep me motivated to keep trying to achieve new things and never letting myself use my disability as an excuse not to do something. I was allocated a physical therapist and an occupational therapist who helped me a lot in making some of the mind changes I had to make, and also they were there to point out to me when I was being too harsh on myself, which I am guilty of. But I do think I'd rather be guilty of pushing myself too hard than to lay off and use the pain and disability as a reason not to do things, which would be easy to do. When the pain is at level 8 or 9 and you've got writing to do or another vlog post to film and record, then knowing the balance between resting and pushing myself is so critical. So it was incredibly useful in having those people around me to support me and to encourage me, but also to remind me to ease up when I was in severe pain. So I was learning how to adapt to my new disabled lifestyle. But there is one question that is the most important question you will have to ask yourself when you find yourself in this kind of situation, and it's a very difficult one, perhaps the most difficult one you'll ever ask yourself. Who and what am I going to do and be for the rest of my life? By that I mean, what is your purpose now? My old career was now impossible to do. My entire life had been in the health and fitness industry. Could I not move into something related but not need physical input? The problem I had was that I loved my old career and who I was so much that firstly I had to let go completely of it before I could begin to even think about what I was going to do next. What that meant in reality was that I decided to throw away everything that reminded me of my old career. All of my trophies, my old photographs, the videos of my shows, the DVDs, everything went into the bin. Extreme? Yes. Do I regret it now? Yes, I do. But then it was something that I felt that I had to do at the time. I just couldn't stand having anything at all associated with bodybuilding around me, or even to know it lay dormant elsewhere wasn't good enough. I had to destroy it, basically. I think in metaphorical or philosophical terms, I was dying in order to live again, a type of resurrection, as it were. Since then, I've read similar types of quotes, often in a religious sense, that in order to live forever, you must first die. And obviously, there is a Christ-like element to that. And maybe that's what Christ's death is meant to signify for those of us who aren't Christians. That the passage in the Bible recording Jesus' death is a metaphor that in order to find new life, a better, more truthful, more virtuous, more courageous, more honest, more fulfilling life, first we must kill all of those pieces of ourselves that are stopping us from growing into the man or woman that we could become. I don't know, but I think for me, that was what it felt like. It gave me a blank slate, a clean board on which I could write a new story, a new biography with new adventures, new characters, and all with a new standard and with a new body, albeit one with less mobility and more pain, but perhaps it could be something good or even great that could come out of this thing, no matter how tragic it seemed then. I also began reading more books, anything and everything I could get my hands on about psychology, motivation, self-help, philosophy, history, and then all the great classics of literature, the Dostoevskys, the Dickens, the Brontes, Homer, Sophocles. I read vociferously, and it helped. I couldn't take it all in, and a lot of things I wasn't yet ready or wise enough to understand, but I was learning some great information and advice, especially from the world of literature. Great authors like Dostoevsky, Dickens, Steinbeck, Hemingway, all had life lessons in them which were easy to pick up, and I could use to my situation positive messages of hope of a better future, not just a bearable one in which I could get around in a wheelchair and get a few things done, but one where I could once again see myself as the author of my own classic novel, where I still had adventures to climb and mountains to climb, literally as well as metaphorically. I decided that I was going to view life as a movie or a play, not necessarily light-hearted though, but one where I had played one role in the first part of my life, and now in the second part of the movie I get to play a new role. Do you see the difference in the way that sounds now? Not I had to play a new role or character, but that I got to play a new role. I was blessed to have the chance to be given the opportunity to play a completely new person, and that could be whoever I wanted it to be. The only one putting a limit on who and what I could do was myself. So I chose to become an academic. I had loved reading all of those books, and I'd been quite academic at school, but I'd passed on going to university to go to work instead to earn money, by which I could then pursue my bodybuilding career. So I had applied to a university in Scotland to study Scottish history, as that was the subject that I was most interested in at the time, and I got accepted. This did mean then, though, that my family and I would have to move to Scotland in order for me to do the degree, and that was a huge move, a scary one, and my wife was very unsure at the beginning, but when we took a week to look at the area we thought we might like to live here in Scotland, she began to see how beautiful it is and how it really could be a positive move, not just for me and for her, but more importantly for our children. We drove around the Perth area and found a beautiful big house just outside of Fastley, some 45 minutes north of Perth in the Scottish Highlands, just north of Pitlochry, and we put in an application to rent the property. A few weeks later, we were there. The vans had dropped off our furniture and the children all had a bedroom each with a large reception room, a huge living room and another large room that I was going to use as an office or a study room. Life was moving forwards again, but there was still a long way to go for me in terms of knowing what exactly I was going to do with the rest of my life. Working through a degree program was the first thing I had to do. It was interesting, and we all soon began to feel very much at home in Perthshire. It's a beautiful county, and as time passed, we got to settle in very easily and enjoy the area as a family and as a couple again. Lots of studying around little trips in the car to the mountains and to little villages and castles were enjoyable. My marks were very good at uni. In fact, I was doing really well and getting on very well with all of the professors and lecturers, producing some good essays, and then I began doing some independent research for the university, which made me think they must think me capable of representing them in the world of academia, not just to do a degree. I also continued training, of course. That never stopped. I found a great gym in Perth, the Body Academy, where Vicky McCann was the owner and had been a world champion natural bodybuilder herself. So although I couldn't bring myself to face my own bodybuilding history, I did find it easy to fit in there. And although we had known each other's names previously, we had never previously met before, but we have become good friends. She obviously knew I had been in bodybuilding for a long time, but was polite enough not to ask about the story which had led to me being there in crutches and unable to move around like everybody else. After I had graduated with a first from that degree, I felt like I wanted to learn more about a new subject. And after all the reading that I had done over the previous few years, I chose to do a degree in literature. This turned out to be a real turning point for me. Not only did I learn so many new things and new valuable knowledge through reading the classics from authors all around the world, but I realized that I was actually good myself at writing as well as spoken communication. I had already known that I was pretty good at verbal communication through my coaching days, but that my written word was receiving very good feedback from doctors and professors reinforced my confidence about my ability to write, and has eventually led to me being currently in the process of writing a book alongside my old friend and my best friend, the artist Simon Bisley. It was towards the end of this degree that I began to think about what I should do after this spell of education in my life. True, my mobility issues still presented obstacles to many occupations, but I began to realize that I was always more happy and also motivated when working for myself. In the past, as a gym owner or as a personal trainer. So now I started to think about what type of business I could successfully start that could involve all of the new skills I had learned over the last decade, as well as the skills I had learned in the previous 40 years. At the same time, I didn't want to stop learning either, so I applied to the university for a research grant to do a project on the author that I had chosen for my thesis in my honours, an author, a lady called Nan Shepherd, the Scottish 20th century author of The Living Mountain. Now, things weren't completely in place, granted, but they were starting to take shape, and therefore my depression and the PTSD from the accident began to be replaced by more positivity and hope for the future for both myself and my family. But let's put it all into perspective. It's taken me well over 10 years to get to this position. 10 years of working hard daily with rehab therapy, support from psychologists and psychiatrists, external support I sought out myself, such as Wim Hof's breathing and ice cold water therapy, meditation, and also the years in the gym, still trying my best to train what I could in any manner that did not cause me excruciating pain, and sometimes even accepting that in order to just feel I was still capable of training as an athlete. It wasn't easy, and it was far from overnight. So what I suppose I'm telling you is, don't be afraid if the solutions to your problems, pains and anxieties can't be fixed with a magic bullet or a quick self-help book or guru. They won't, sadly. But I can guarantee you that if you begin to fill your mind with good words from good books, good thoughts, good ideas, and then take action on those ideas, no matter how small they may appear right now, you will move forward. And who knows what you will accomplish when you are 10 years into your recovery. Don't be daunted by the concept of 10 years either, as I experienced many wins along the way that made those 10 years a series of smaller monthly, sometimes daily wins. Yes, you will have your bad days, days when the pain is so bad, for me, physically and emotionally, for you, perhaps emotionally or psychologically or physical, or whatever your pain is, that you can't do anything but just get through that day. But I would suggest that you never give in to that pain to the extent of not getting up on any day. Force yourself, if need be, to at least form some structure into your day, even if it is just to get up, get washed, or have help getting washed and get changed, comb your hair. Even that has served a valuable service. It has kept your pride and honour as to who it is you are intact. Okay, so you may not do anything else that day, but at least you showed up. You couldn't do any more because of the pain, but you were there, and that is what counts. You are still the man or woman you are creating, and that is the greatest version and vision of you that you can imagine. That is still to come. Maybe you'll never quite satisfy exactly who it is you wish to become, But if you can get up on your worst day, I have a feeling you will. Even now, I have days when my spinal stenosis or my hip acetabular impingements are so bad I have to stop and reset myself and give myself the day off. But I will always get up, I will always get washed, always get dressed, and I will read. I've turned up, plus the fact that I've told the truth that day. I didn't lie, I was virtuous, I had integrity, was kind, I was courageous, and I held myself to all my standards. I have set myself out to become. Now that's a win in my book. There are many people out there who have no physical disabilities, no physical pains, and have lied, have been cowardly, have not told the truth, have not been virtuous, have not been noble nor honest that day. So which one would you rather be? The disabled man or woman of high values and ethics? Or the physically abled one who still had to lie, cheat, couldn't be courageous, couldn't be honest nor virtuous due to their desire for instant gratification? I know which one I would rather be. What about you? And if you do decide to live this way, others will notice, and not just your family and friends, but strangers around you. They will notice the energy you give out, the charisma of a woman or a man who has given into nothing, has continued succeeding through life despite all the tragedies life has thrown their way. There is great power in that, believe me. And not only will they notice you, but you will find that doors begin to open for you. Opportunities will present themselves that you had never experienced before. Is it coincidence? No, I don't think so. I think it's that people respect someone who is trying to be great. You don't have to actually be great to do this, but simply trying to be great is more than most people ever give. And that is a powerful thing. You know the old saying, everybody loves a winner. But I believe the saying is more accurately like this. Everybody loves someone who attempts greatness. Whether they succeed or not is irrelevant, but it certainly isn't the be-all and end-all. As long as you don't give in, as long as you don't quit, stop through fear or procrastination, but you keep going towards your purpose. That one thing that you were always destined to do and be. The thing that you were always meant to leave as your legacy to the world. Then everybody will applaud you. They will clap for you. They will shout for you, stand for you, and smile with you at every tiny win. Then that's all we need to do. Now, I say all as though it's simple, a simple task. No, it's not. To keep trying when you are in pain, and not just a little pain, but the pain that etches the lines into my face, the pain that doubles you over, the pain that takes the breath out of you, that begs you to stop, that pain. That takes courage. And I think it's a human staple, one of those rare things that unites every human on the planet. To see somebody who's striving against something heavier than they are alone, but to keep moving forwards regardless. That's something that all humans have to acknowledge. Whether you try to stifle the emotion or not, it's still there at the bottom of your soul. How can we but stand and applaud those that carry on regardless of that pain? So, where am I at today? a lot further forwards than I was 10 years ago for sure. I'm better than I was 5 years ago. Definitely better than I was 4 years ago. When I fell, again this time, I was on my first holiday abroad for decades. My crutches caught a hole in the uneven ground. I was walking across, it was an archaeological site. And yes, I probably shouldn't have attempted it, but I did. And I suffered for my moment of passion for history by falling and snapping the left leg this time, or the tendons and the ligaments sheared off, not neatly, sadly, but very messily, and so I ended up returning back to the UK in a full leg cast, only to go through another round of rehab again for another ruptured quadricep, but this time with my pelvis, spine and other leg already damaged. That fall nearly did me in, I'll be honest. But the books that I had read, the techniques I had learned already in how to cope with pain and tragic circumstance, all helped keep me relatively sane and together, and with support from the team at my local hospital and my occupational therapist, I managed to keep going and somehow miraculously completed that second honours degree in literature. I'm now in the position of still working with my university, hopefully just about to start a 12-month research project. I'm also writing a book that will be illustrated by my best friend for over 25 years, Simon Bisley, and have embarked on my own website, my YouTube channel, and these vlogs, which I hope will help some people, entertain some, and maybe even inspire some too. We're seldom told or know when we're young just how ruthless and tragic life can be, often at no result from a mistake that we've made, but just some random incident of fate. And yet, should we teach our young ones just how harsh life can be? Or should we let them enjoy their years of childhood in blissful ignorance, as we all know that sooner or later life will teach them its own dark soul eventually? As a father, I think I'd like to keep my children as innocent as long as possible, but to grow their knowledge with their years, so that by the time they are approaching adulthood, they are not just aware, but they're equipped to be able to deal with whatever life throws at them. So I'm going to end it there. Yes, this week's vlog has not been about bodybuilding or stories about my bodybuilding past, but a much more general talk, a talk out loud about life, about life's tragedy, but also about the potential greatness of life and of human greatness. So whoever this reaches, I hope that you've gained something from listening to this. I hope sincerely that life never throws anything at you as large as it has done me, but sadly life has a habit of doing so with most of us. If it isn't accidents from nowhere, it could be the loss of a parent, heaven forbid a child, a brother or sister. But life can produce tragedy out of anything, and anything can affect different people as tragic events. So please, never assume whatever it is you're going through is any greater or any lesser than the next person's. For until we can truly get to experience life in someone else's shoes, then we must be as forgiving, as generous and as kind as possible in whatever circumstances we find ourselves. But alongside kindness and forgiveness, so too do we need that courage I spoke about earlier. Be courageous. Stand for something noble, worthy of humans' greatest endeavours, and don't ever quit. As I always used to finish my bodybuilding vlogs with this line, so too it is appropriate here. Get those 3 extra reps that are always inside of you. 3 more reps, friends. That means when you think you've given your all, when you think there's nothing left inside of you, that your body has given everything it could possibly give to that one set, you somehow, somewhere inside of you, produce 3 more repetitions. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll see you next week. And maybe back to some more good old stories about 80s and 90s bodybuilding. Thank you. Goodbye.